Welcome to In the Cut, the show that gets you up close and personal with BN and our community.
Good afternoon, morning, or evening. Welcome to In the Cut, the show that gets you up close and personal with Black non-believers and our community. My name is Mandisa Thomas, and I'm the founder and president. Welcome to today's episode. Just as a reminder, In the Cut is a production of Black Non-Believers, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization headquartered in the Atlanta, Georgia area. We connect with other Blacks and allies who are living free from religion and other superstitious beliefs, who might be otherwise shunned by family members and friends, by providing a caring, festive, and informative community. Instead of accepting dogma, we determine truth and morality through reason and evidence. And as always, the mission of Black non-believers is to provide secular fellowship, nurture and support non-believers in coming out, also known as open identification, encourage pride in non-religious identities, educate on the history and current state of non-belief in Black communities, and also organize events and charitable causes. Black non-believers welcomes all regardless of age, gender identity, sexual identity, national origin, or racial identity. However, our work and our content always prioritizes and centers Black non-religious voices. And so I'm really excited about today's guest because this goes into educating upon the history of, of non-belief, humanism, and atheism in Black communities. And speaking of humanism, today is World Humanist Day. So happy World Humanist Day to all of us who identify. Of course, humanism is a philosophy that centers doing good for the world without belief in God. And so if you are not familiar, yes, so around the world, we celebrate World Humanist Day. And for those of us who advocate for our, for our perspective. And shout out to Humanist International, who came up with an article, and also the American Humanist Association as well. And we'd like to shout out our humanist groups across the African diaspora. You have the Humanists of Ghana, you have the Humanists of Nigeria, Humanists in Barbados. And so there are other groups that we connect with at Black Non-Believers across the globe, especially for representation in the African diaspora, as non-believers and humanists as atheists. So happy World Humanist Day to us all. And also we are now in the summer season. The summer solstice started yesterday. And so we are getting ready for a very busy summer, which we will talk about later on in the show. We are going to let you know where we are, where we will be, and we hope that you will as well. So yes, happy summer solstice. Hopefully you have some exciting things planned. And again, we hope that you will be a part of everything that we have done. And speaking of, we'd like to thank everyone who attended our secular Juneteenth celebration, the virtual event that we held on Juneteenth this past Thursday. Shout out to Cynthia, who was my co-host, Cynthia out of Chicago, Chi-Town, who was holding it down up there. So, and I must say that we appreciate everyone who donated to be in for Juneteenth. We had a few folks who became official members, and also who we had one registration for being SeaCon. So we appreciate it all. We need your support. Thank you very, very much. As we know, Juneteenth was made a federal holiday in 2021 under the Biden administration. There are still a number of people who are not aware of Juneteenth, even though it has been celebrated in Black communities for over a century and a half. I grew up celebrating Juneteenth events and participating in Juneteenth events. And if you'd like to learn more, we definitely encourage you to do so. We will have the recording of the event available shortly once it's edited. We will share it on our channel so that you can catch up with what you missed. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not once again encourage you to support the work of Black Nonbelievers. You can send us a super chat through this live stream. Your super chats will be read on the air. And also, you can go to our website and donate directly. Again, we are a 501c3 organization, so donations are tax deductible. So please, please, please do support the work. We are in our mid-year campaign fundraising season. So please do support our work. So at this point, we'll get right into our interview. It is our pleasure to welcome our special guest, Dr. Brian Kwoba. Dr. Kwoba is an associate professor of history and director of African American Studies program, the African American Studies program at the University of Memphis. While completing his doctoral degree at the University of Oxford, he co-founded the Oxford Pan-African Forum, OXPAF, and the hashtag Rhodes Must Fall movement to decolonize education at Oxford. Over the past 2 decades, Dr. Kwoba has been an activist on issues including anti-imperialism, immigrant workers' rights, climate justice, Palestine, and the movement for Black lives. His new book, Hubert Harrison, Forbidden Genius of Black Radicalism, is an intellectual biography of one of history's most underappreciated political visionaries. Welcome to the show, Dr. Kwoba.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great to be here, Mandisa. Great to meet you in person. I know we've had some discussion over email. So yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Do you prefer Dr. Kwoba or Brian, or does it, I'll refer to you however you want.
Either one is fine. Brian is fine if you want to keep it more, informal and conversational. But yeah, either one is fine. And thanks again for shouting out my book. It's finally here. I'm happy to say, after over a decade in the making. Yeah, it's been a long time coming. So this is a very important moment for me.
Awesome. Yeah, writing books can take some time, doing the research and finding the time to do it. So I totally understand. And I'd like to shout out Chris Cameron for recommending you, and who is on our board. And he is, very, very much a part of the Bean family. And so, yeah, I definitely appreciate him sending you our way. So that we can talk about Hubert Harrison, who we definitely hold in very high regard in our community. So, shout out to Chris for that. So we're going to get right into it. First, we want folks to get to know you. Please tell our audience and me about, your background, your upbringing, your journey, and how you arrived here.
Absolutely. And yeah, I just want to second the shout out to Chris Cameron. He wrote the book, Black Freethinkers, right? A history of Black freethinkers. And I cited his book in my work, of course, and I'm building on a lot of what he's doing there by taking Harrison, a deeper dive with Harrison. In terms of my own background, my own upbringing, so my father is from Kenya, Black Kenyan man. My mother's a white American woman. A lot of people think of Obama when they hear that, Kenyan father, white American mother. But I have obviously a very different trajectory and political outlook than Obama. But I grew up mostly with my mom. So I didn't have as much Kenyan or African influence culturally or food-wise or music-wise until a bit later in life. Nowadays, I go to Kenya twice a year because I love it. It's my happy place. I wear the Kenyan flag, permanently on my on my wrist. And I'm a Kenyan citizen, dual citizen. So So that's been a whole journey we could talk about. But in terms of my relationship to this question of belief and faith, my mother's side is Christian, sort of culturally, not super religious. And so I didn't really go to church much as a child. Went a few times, but it certainly wasn't a weekly thing. It wasn't anything regular. Maybe around Easter or around Christmas time, or those kind of things. But I never had like a strong grounding in the church or in Christianity, and I think that made it easier for me to, as I got a little older and got into college, I became an activist my senior year of college, and that's when I really kind of leaned more into atheism, because I was never sort of compelled by Christianity or religion, any other religion. And then I was getting tools like Marxism, for example, with which to unpack and analyze the world, and religion as a part of that. And so I've had and since that time, I spent some years as an atheist, and eventually I got to a place where I kind of became more curious about spirituality, particularly as I was starting to trying to decolonize my mind and tap into my Kenyan roots and more traditional African spiritualities before the sort of major religions were imposed on African people. And but I'm also an agnostic in that sense, I guess you could say, because I'm not like dogmatic about anything. I really try to approach everything with an open mind, and my activism also, I'll just say, fuels a lot of how I see the world. Since undergrad days, which is over 20 years ago now, as hard as that is to say or to reckon with, I started out building the anti-war movement during the Iraq War years, George W. Bush, early 2000s, and I've done a lot of other things, as you mentioned in your introduction, been active on a lot of other issues. And that's something that, I think gave me a unique perspective on Hubert Harrison, because he also was very much an activist, a community organizer, an educator, a journalist, and a visionary thinker. And so yeah, all of those things inform my approach to Harrison and the stories that I tell in this book.
Awesome. So I have a side question from the questions that I sent to you. So was it later on in life that you connected with your dad's side, and did that also inform your your passion as a Pan-Africanist, having been raised with your white mom? Was there a longing for connection to your dad's side, as well as a connection to that community?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't particularly politically conscious when I was younger. And as I became more so with time, I certainly became more curious about my African heritage. Because I had never been to, I didn't go to Kenya for the first time until I was in my 20s. And so I didn't have that influence. And I had some curiosity when I was younger, but not enough to like drive me to go there and visit and meet my cousins and my aunts and uncle and extended family. So yeah, that was definitely something that came with my political consciousness, my consciousness about imperialism, about, the Pan-African movements of the past in history that, fought the colonizers and fought for independence and liberation for African people. Naturally, I became even more curious to tap into my own story and to understand Kenya, to travel to Kenya, to learn about the people, to start learning, Kiswahili language. And so that's a big part of the journey that I've been on. And I think it informs how I see the world too, because I've spent enough time there, that it's allowed me to see the US from the outside, also living in England, which I did for a number of years, gave yet another vantage point, both on colonialism in the US and the colonial settler country that this is, but also, of course, on British colonialism in Kenya, because Britain is what Kenya and the U.S. have in common, or at least what my heritage, in a sense, has in common, given that Britain was the colonial power in both places.
Gotcha. And having been raised myself in like a Black conscious sort of I have a Pan-Africanist background growing up in New York. So I totally understand. And having visited Ghana as a teenager. So that was very, very influential. And so it really, really did. I definitely understand where you're coming from, but of course you having a direct connection through your lineage that definitely makes a lot of sense. So, so what is? I think I'm going to kind of switch the questions around a little bit. So, Harrison, as we know, he was a free thinker. He was a staunch atheist, and he was also very critical of religion, as I'm sure you found in your research on him. As an activist with a strong social justice focus, do you think that religion tends to be a catalyst in like the colonialization, the imperialism, the oppression of Black folks and other marginalized groups around the world? Do you think as he did, that there is a strong catalyst with religion and the role it has played?
Absolutely. I was thinking I might even share a quote from the book to help answer this question, or to put it in Harrisonian terms. So if you don't mind, I'll just read. This is a paragraph from page 164. I said, Harrison argued that the work of the missionary abroad related to that of a soldier. They were both part of a larger institutional machinery. Quote, in the modern European state, every institution is used by the dominant class to some end which contributes to the general social purpose of that class, unquote. Whether they understood it or not, missionaries played the role of pawns in a larger political game. In fact, for the missionary to be most effective, wrote Harrison, it's better for his masters that he should not see them as his masters. Then he can be quite sincere, earnest, and spiritually minded, unquote. Capitalist and imperialist interests lurked behind missionary work, regardless of whether its ground level functionaries were conscious of it and regardless of their good intentions. Quote, the white missionary's function is to spread that form of religion which will soft soap the soul of Black Africa, so that the business of robbing and ruling it shall become less costly and less dangerous to those who do the robbing and the ruling. So in other words, this idea that missionaries are kind of the handmaidens of colonial domination, right? Paving the way sort of ideologically and in terms of justifying the mission, the civilizing mission. That's how Christianity spread to so much of the world, right? Particularly in Africa, under the impact of, European slavers and colonizers. And I think in this context, in the African-American context, we know that, Christianity played a key role. And this is something Harrison was arguing as well, that it played a key role in greasing the wheels of slavery, right? And in particular, getting people of African descent, enslaved people, to be more servile, to be more acquiescent or even content with their situation, under a kind of religious justification. And many, one of the things I found in my research is that many of the early Black nationalists and Pan-Africanists kind of almost accepted some of these assumptions. Many of the 19th century Black nationalists, for example, thought that Africa was backward and that the natives there needed to be civilized and needed to be Christianized from the outside in order to develop or advance themselves, which was, of course, parroting the line of the colonizer and their justification of colonialism. Harrison is one of the first thinkers who really breaks with that whole tradition and says, we actually have a number of civilizations in Africa. Africa is already civilized. This talk of civilizing Africa is actually about justifying the violent imposition of capitalism. through the colonial process, right? And that's, I think, another reason why people of African descent have good reason to be quite skeptical towards Christianity and religion generally. I mean, we could talk about, the history of Islam and the way that it justified the enslavement of Africans, particularly in East Africa, like Kenya, where I'm from, or where my dad's side is from. And so yeah, I think these are some of the reasons why Harrison and many of us, are skeptical of religion, because we see how it continues to kind of colonize the mind and get people to accept horrendous conditions in the present on the grounds that, life will be better in heaven.
Yes. So briefly, so Harrison, and how did that? And I may know a bit about like his contemporaries of the day, like Marcus Garvey, who was considered the father of, Black nationalism with, and the red, black, and green flag and the movement back to Africa. He was also a Christian. So how did that briefly, like, did Harrison really like clash, or did it conflict with his contemporaries of his day? The Black nationalists and the Black leaders of that, especially during that time period.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, first of all, to say something about Garvey, I mean, Harrison had a decisive impact on the rise of Garvey and Garveyism, because when Garvey gets to New York, he joins Harrison's Liberty League of Negro Americans, which trains Garvey in a whole different perspective from the one he had before. Garvey initially was trying to build a Tuskegee-style institute for industrial education in Jamaica. Once he meets Harrison, joins the Liberty League in Harlem, Harrison is talking about a race-first politics, right? He's talking about building an internationalist politics for Black folks, a Pan-Africanist politics. He's talking about a mass movement, right, rather than just a brick-and-mortar school. Garvey adopts all these elements to grow the UNIA into what becomes the largest international organization of African people, in modern history. But he could not have done that without certain key strategic and ideological elements that he learned in Harrison's Liberty League. Another example of how you can see this is both Garvey and Du Bois, another sort of important figure in the Pan-African pantheon. Both Garvey and Du Bois initially held quite paternalistic views toward Africans, much like I was saying about the 19th century Black nationalists. So, for example, one of the stated objectives of Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association, when he founded it in 1914, was to, quote, assist in civilizing the backward tribes of Africa. Now, again, we don't have to doubt that Garvey was sincere in his desire to uplift African people, to see them better, their conditions all over the world become better. We don't have to doubt that he was sincere to realize that actually there were some problematic views with which he went about securing those goals. Du Bois, in a similar fashion, after World War I, Du Bois was initially arguing that the African colonies which Germany lost in the war should be given over to be governed by responsible or respectable Blacks in the West, like himself, right? In other words, this idea that, the talented 10th of the race should lead not only African Americans, but also lead Black Africans on the continent. Harrison, again, broke fundamentally with this view. Harrison said, before we set out to teach any Africans anything, we should learn what they have to teach us, because they have much to teach us. Harrison studied the history of African civilizations, right? He studied systems of worship, systems of agriculture, systems of political systems on the continent. And he read widely in that, and was basically one of the first people to say, look, this whole train of thinking about we need to civilize them, we need to teach them, we need to govern them, right? All of that is backwards. And true African redemption has to come from within, right? It's African people themselves who need to free themselves, not benevolent outsiders, even if they're African Americans in the diaspora. And so I think that, that really was a paradigm shift in a lot of ways, and it's something that to this day remains a very generative idea, given the Western media portrayals as Africa, the portrayals of Africa as a continent that's just negative stuff, you know, Ebola and AIDS and poverty and tribal conflict and so on. To this day, it remains a very powerful idea that actually we need to learn from Africans. We need to study Africa. We need to study what they have to teach us. Because again, we're constantly sort of fed with Afrophobic and very denigrating images of Africans and Africa.
Let me unmute there. Yes, that also speaks to internalized white supremacy, you know, as we know it today. And so that actually kind of answers the question about what are some new perspectives, because I certainly was not aware that Harrison was a proponent of learning from, you know, from our counterparts, our African counterparts and brothers and sisters before a lot of his contemporaries. And we know that many of the leaders did hold some very, very problematic views. And it was so ironic that W.E.B. Du Bois, you know, became a Pan-Africanist later on in his life, and he died in Ghana, you know, where he ended up relocating. And so I remember visiting the center where, you know, that the center that was named after him in Accra. You know, and yes, he was staunchly like, and I know that he clashed with Garvey as well and Booker T. Washington. And so there was, you know, we often talk about like the history of dissent and among our leaders at that time. But, you know, definitely it is great to know that that Marcus Garvey took a lot of good leads from Hubert Harrison. And so that's great.
Yeah,
so
just say quickly, to be fair, to their credit, both Garvey and Du Bois did evolve over time. By the mid-20s, they had reached a position of more respect and humility towards Africa, relinquishing their initial paternalism that they had held. But people like Harrison were crucial in that process, right? By critiquing the sort of common sense paternalism of the day and actually showing an alternative way to relate to Africans and African people. One of my favorite stories about Harrison that I just have to share here is that, you know, and we have to remember, this was a time, early 1900s, where they literally put a Congolese man named Otabenga in the monkey house section of the Bronx Zoo as something to display among the monkeys. That's how racist, right, the context is we're dealing with. Meanwhile, just next door from the Bronx in Harlem, Harrison identified him. He writes this journal entry where it's basically a pledge to Mother Africa, and he ends it by identifying himself as an untamed, untamable African. And I think that's just such a beautiful formulation, particularly for someone who was born in the Caribbean island of St. Croix, what is now the U.S. Virgin Islands, moves to New York as a teenager, never actually set foot, as far as I know, on the continent of Africa. But he had such a deep-seated awareness about his African heritage in the Caribbean and the power of that through his studies of African history and culture, that he could identify as an untamed, untamable African, even at a time when Africans were seen as monkeys in a zoo and literally put in the Bronx Zoo for that purpose, right? So yeah, it's an extraordinary figure and someone we need to take more seriously, I think.
Yes, which leads us to the next question of how can we put more of Harrison's work into our activism today, especially given this current presidential administration that we are in right now, that we are all still mentally trying to, you know, grapple with and just really trying to navigate through. How should we all take Harrison's work and apply it today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot to say about this. In fact, I wrote the whole book with an eye towards, I mean, of course, I'm a historian and it's about history, but I wrote it with an eye towards how we can apply that history today. You know, as an activist, I only began to care about history when I realized that it explains how we got the world that we have. And so so my book is very much focused on answering that question, you know, in a lot longer format than I could do here. But I'll just say for now, one example that I think is really important is Harrison's anti-imperialist politics. You know, Harrison lived during a time of the First World War, which, you know, he described as the White World War, because it was all these white European nations fighting each other after carving up the rest of the world, colonizing the rest of the world, Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean. You know, they ran out of places to carve up and conquer, and so they start turning inward, right? And so Harrison, you know, had an anti-imperialist politics where he could understand that this is just a war of bandits, right? They're trying to decide who's going to colonize Africa, who's going to, you know, be the top dog in the sort of world economic system. And we're seeing that today, right? We're seeing, you know, the US and Israel attacking Iran, not to mention Syria and, you know, Libya and Palestine and all these other places. We're seeing the Russians, you know, warring with Ukraine, and the US supporting Ukraine as it's trying to fight against Russia. Military tensions with China, right? I mean, all of this speaks to the need for us to apply an anti-imperialist frame to the world and understand that these wars are not in our interests, right? These wars are actually only in the interests of the various ruling classes of the world, whether it's the U.S. ruling class and the arms industry and the weapons, you know, manufacturers, the oil industry, the military industrial complex. They're the only ones who stand to gain from this. Our tax dollars are not going to benefit us from these wars, not to mention our lives if they send U.S. troops, you know, to fight in Iran, for example, or to fight in Ukraine or elsewhere. So that's one really, really key lesson from Harrison is the need to have a clear anti-imperialist political understanding if we actually want to get out of this endless cycle of wars. Another one I'll just share briefly is I think he had this very multifaceted, multidimensional way of looking at the world and learning about the world. And so there's a quote that I love from Harrison. I'll just share this quote because it so captures the method that I'm trying to describe here. And basically what he says is, if I can just find it here, he says, he's talking to young people and he's trying to tell them how they should educate themselves. And he says basically he encourages them to get education, quote, not only in school and college, but in books and newspapers, in marketplaces, institutions, and movements. Prepare by knowing and never think you know until you've listened to 10 others who know differently and have survived the shock. So this idea that we actually need to test our ideas with 10 other people who know differently and see if they hold up. That's a very rigorous sort of methodology for trying to understand or learn or know anything, right? And so I think one of the beautiful things I got to do in writing this book was to really engage with a lot of different, you know, historical arguments and political institutions and ideas, and try to sift through all of that to see what sticks and what has the staying power. And Harrison, I just learned so much from him because by studying a figure who used that method to arrive at his conclusions, it was just a very enriching and sort of useful thing that I think we can apply, that all of us could apply today to a whole number of different questions.
Yes, and that is a part of the critical thought process, you know, which definitely goes beyond the strict adherence to like religion and Christianity and the church, you know, which was definitely antithetical to what a lot of people thought at the time. So that is absolutely revolutionary. So that is amazing. And so I do want to ask one more question of you. I saw in your Instagram story that there is a 92-year-old who is being tried for the murder of Patrice Lumumba in the, you know, in the Congo. And so with this global reckoning of colonialization, imperialism, and the unjust murders of political leaders at the hands of white supremacy in Africa and also the U.S. You know, we saw the murder, the murders of Medgar Evers, vindicated, as well as the three civil rights workers, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner.
Yeah.
And so, how
Not to
long do you
mention Dr. King and Malcolm X.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So
and Fred Hampton.
Yes. And so and always around Juneteenth, there is a conversation about reparations and what it means for justice and global justice. How do these all come into play? Because I think that there are also other nations that are looking for reparations from the countries who were responsible for the transatlantic slave trade and the economic rewards that they reap as a result. This is probably like a very, very comprehensive question, but how do you think this all comes into play now? And what do you think this means for us moving forward as we look towards not just the criminal justice, but also economic justice for the descendants of the enslaved and colonized?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I learned in the UK while I was doing my doctoral study and writing about Harrison initially, I met this woman, Esther Stanford Jose, one of the leading campaigners for reparations in Europe. And she really blew my mind on this question because her argument was basically, we tend to think of reparations in a purely economic framework, right? Like corporations or the government paying a check to the descendants of slavery. And she got me to think of it much more as a repair process, right? Reparations and repair have the same root. And so, yes, there are economic repairs to be made. There was economic damage done by slavery and colonization and these things. But there was a whole lot of other types of damage too. There was damage to our psyche that needs to be repaired. There was damage to our history that needs to be repaired. There was damage to our family relations and kinship structures that needs to be repaired. There was damage to our political rights and relationship to political decision-making that needs to be repaired, right? So when you think about reparations as a repair process, you realize that it's bigger and deeper than just a check. It's something that requires healing from some of the wounds of slavery and colonization, the post-traumatic slave syndrome, right? There are deep wounds that are unhealed there that need to be repaired as part of any serious discussion or reckoning with a reparations framework, because otherwise we're in a situation where you give people a lot of checks. We're still living under capitalism and imperialism. And where does that money get spent? Does it change anything structural about the power relationships in society, the racial and gendered and, class divided society that we live in? All of that was set up by slavery and colonization. So the ultimate reparations is to actually dismantle and transform the structures of inequality and the structures of power imbalance, both nationally and internationally, that history created. And so I think that's another thing that we can learn from Harrison, because Harrison lived in a time of world revolution. As much as you had the destruction and trauma and dislocation of the First World War, it also triggered or set off basically a global political awakening. You had the Russian Revolution, you had the New Negro movement in this country, a very militant, class conscious, race conscious movement that lays the groundwork for things like Garveyism, right, and African nationalism and anti-colonialism. So that's another, I guess, sliver of hope maybe in the wild world that we're living in now, is that oppression always breeds resistance. And so as bad as things get with Trump, with whatever else is happening, there's always that seed or kernel of resistance that can come forth sometimes when you least expect it. And I think, the lesson there is like, let's not lose all hope because people are fighting back and people are resisting more and more, I think, as people start to wake up.
Absolutely. And we've seen this throughout the course of history, like even during the enslaved. You know, there are many people who would like to think that our enslaved ancestors just simply accepted their conditions, and they did not. There's always been uprisings. There's always been a resistance, and we have to continue that. So, oh my gosh, yes, thank you so much. I know we only have like a limited time on the show.
Sorry, are you still there, Mandisa? I'm not getting your signal all of a sudden. Well, I think I'm still live, so I don't know what happened to Mandisa, but for those who are still with us, I think she was going to ask one last question, which I'm just pulling up here. Oh, there's something else I wanted to share since I didn't get to yet, and this was about her question about new perspectives from Harrison we can take into our work today. Oh, it looks like she's coming back.
Okay. Here
we lost.
We lost. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened, but sorry about that. I'm back. I'm back. Yeah, my computer just did something really weird.
That's okay. That's okay. There was one thing. There was one other thing I wanted to share. I don't know how much time we have.
Sure.
But
we still got a few minutes. Go ahead. That's perfectly fine.
Let me just say one last thing about your question about some new perspectives we can take from Harrison's work into the world now, what we can apply. One of the things that I found most fascinating, most controversial, and most generative about Harrison was his free love politics. And this is something that no one who's written about Harrison has really gone into with any depth. Harrison, as far as I can tell, was the first person in African-American history to denounce church and state repression of sexuality, and also to call for the decriminalization of access to contraception, and to support the idea that we should not necessarily, we are not monogamists by nature, but by the compulsion of society, and to basically critique this whole structure of compulsory monogamy, right? The idea that you can only be with one person and that's the only respectable relationship or romantic format. Harrison was able to see how capitalism and white supremacy and imperialism and colonialism are also tied to compulsory monogamy, because it was that sort of form that Europeans imposed on the rest of the world. You know, as African people, we never made monogamy the center of the universe when it comes to sex, love, and marriage, right? We had plural marriage, we had polygyny, we had different forms. We had a whole wide range of different sexualities, especially before colonization, you know, made everything monotone. You know, there's even stories like the Dagara people in Burkina Faso who treated what we think of as queer folks as spiritually elevated, and people who actually had one foot in the spirit world and one foot in this world, and had a special role to play in the community as a result of that. So this question of sexual liberation, which of course emerges in Harlem during Harrison's time in the so-called Harlem Renaissance, when you had a lot of new sort of experiments in Black queerness, Black queer sexualities and stuff like that, I think is part and parcel of this larger question of Black liberation or human liberation, but one that has often been neglected in particular ways. And so that's another just really fascinating and sort of compelling aspect, I think, of Harrison, is that he was a pioneering Black free lover, and he was open about it. And he paid a cost for that, right? Because it was very taboo. But when you look at his arguments and why he took those positions, I think we have a lot to learn from. And it's still a very generative area of critique and interrogation.
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm sold now because, when we, that is absolutely fantastic because, as an organization, we do advocate for, and of course, we are very, very pro sexual liberation and empowerment, LGBTQ plus empowered. And that is not something that is new. We've always had to beat back against, like you said, white supremacy and how that has infused itself into Black respectability politics, which was very, 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 very huge back then. So that is very, very, that was very, I was not aware of that. And that is fantastic to learn. So
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate you sharing that perspective on him. And I definitely look forward to reading your book. And so I'm very, very excited to learn more about Hubert Harrison, especially from those perspectives that have not been shared before. So yes, we have linked the book in the chat. Please do get and also in the description, please do get your copy of Dr. Kwoba's book, Hubert Harrison, Forbidden Genius of Black Radicalism. Thank you so much. And as I was saying before my computer decided to act weird, we'd love to have you back on the show. We'd love to have you as a part of, the BN family, like Chris Cameron is. We definitely want to help promote the book and the rest of your work. So thank you so much for being a guest on the show today. We look forward to having you back with us in the very near future. And you are also embarking on a book tour. So whenever you are in any of our cities, definitely look forward to helping facilitate something here in the Atlanta area when you're here. So yeah, we will definitely be in touch. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful for this shot, and I will be hopefully coming soon to a bookstore near you, wherever you are in the country. Because the book just came out last week. It's hot off the press, and I'm really, really excited to share it. So look forward to further engagements here, and maybe even at I know you guys have a convention or a conference or something of your own.
We do. We host a cruise convention every year. We'd love to have you next year as our as one of our guests. We do events regularly. So absolutely.
That's great.
That's definitely would love to have you a part. He was just in Chicago, Cynthia. We just missed it. You just missed him in Chicago.
I'm actually about to come to Chicago over July 4th weekend for the Socialism 2025 conference. I'll be presenting on the book there. So anyone in Chicago. Yeah.
Okay, nice. So we have Cynthia McDonald, who is our Chicago affiliate leader. So we'd love to have you connect with her in the very near future. So thank you once again for being on the show. So
You're welcome.
Really educational and informative. So we appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you. So yes, thank you once again. Please visit Dr. Kwoba's website, briankwoba.com. That was linked in the chat. Follow him on Facebook and also on Instagram. You can find that information in the chat as well. And so it's time to read some super chats. First one is from Kelly. She says, she says the $5. Thank you so much for sending super chat. And also Cynthia actually sent 2 super chats. So she said, boom, how I'm coming in a room. So yes, thank you for that, Cynthia. And thank you, Slick and Salacious, who says it's wild because there is so much in Africa that I've seen that shows how they can be ahead of the curve, which is absolutely correct. That is absolutely correct. You're absolutely right on that. And Cynthia sent another super chat, which says, yes, get your hoe on. Yes, we are pro-ho over here, ethically pro-ho, pro-ethically, ethically non-monogamous, liberating, and so, yes, we stand for all of that. And so Kelly just sent another super chat. Yes, come to Detroit, Dr. Kwoba. So yes, Kelly is is over our Detroit affiliate. So yes, wherever you will be for your book tour, we look forward to keeping you updated, to keeping us updated, and keeping folks and our viewers updated on where you will be. And please, once again, do buy the book and support the work. So now we're coming up to our upcoming events. So this coming weekend, join us in Chicago for the American Humanist Association's conference. I will be there. Kelly will be there. Cynthia is one of the speakers. We will also be joined by Deanna Williams, who is another one of our board members, Candace Gorham, who is the board president of the American Humanist Association. We will be there tabling and soliciting, encouraging people to donate and support Black Nonbelievers. So join us in Chicago from June 27th through the 29th. We look forward to being there. And also the following weekend, July 6th, the weekend of July 6th, which is the July 4th weekend, I will be one of the speakers at the Ark Encounter Protest, which is in Williamstown, Kentucky, right outside of Cincinnati. We will be tabling there as well. So please do join us for that. If you are in or near the area, come on out as we protest the monstrosity that is the Ark Encounter, which is Ken Ham's facility. Kent Hovind, the other Christian apologist who I debated last year, and his crew is supposed to be coming. So please do join us for that. The weekend of July 17th through the 19th, we will also be tabling at the Secular Student Alliance's annual conference, which will be in Cincinnati, Ohio. So please do join us for that as well. And also at the end of July, the 25th through the 27th, that weekend, will be NaNoCon, the Nashville Nuns Convention, where myself and Cynthia and Candace will be singing as part of Godless Gospel. There will be other singers and speakers there. So please do join us for that. Also, we are once again co-sponsoring the Hurston Student Scholarship in collaboration with the Secular Student Alliance. So if you are a high school, university, or continuing education student who is passionate about secular activism, please do apply for the Hurston Scholarship for Black non-religious students. And there are also other scholarships available on their website. The deadline to apply is July 31st. So you have a bit over a month now to apply. So please do. Please support us in our efforts to support education and community building. Also, SeaCon, as we just mentioned, is back from November 1st through the 9th. Join us for SeaCon. We will be sailing again on the Carnival Horizon. The sail dates are November 2nd through the 8th. We will be sailing out of Miami, Florida once again. This ship boasts an IMAX theater, a skyride, 12+ dining options, and more. Our ports of call are Ocho Rios, Jamaica, Grand Cayman Island, and Cozumel, Mexico. Speakers include Dr. Leo Igwe, Jasmine Banks, Candace Gorham, Jeremiah Kamara, Candace Gorham, Cynthia McDonald, George Truly, and more. Prices start at just $7.50 per person per double occupancy. And specialty cabins are available as well as single cabins. If you are interested in attending, please do register. We need more people, and we welcome you. And of course, we have a robust program, as well as a very, very fun and community building time at our SeaCon. So please join us for that. You can also become an official member of Black Nonbelievers, where you will receive discounts to all of our events and also on BN merchandise. You can become an official member for starting as low as $20 per year, especially if you're a student or a senior. And we also have a very reasonable lifetime membership fees, so you can definitely become a member of BN. You have the opportunity to run for office positions. You get insider information, and of course, like I said, discounts for our merchandise as well as our events. And speaking of Godless Gospel, the ensemble is still looking for singers. So if you have some musical chops, and if you're a tenor or alto, please do submit your audition to the Godless Gospel website at godlessgospel.org. This is a paid opportunity. This is a production of the Freedom from Religion Foundation in collaboration with Black Nonbelievers. So please do submit your audition for Godless Gospel. We welcome everyone to submit your audition. Because it is a very, very diverse and a very, very wonderful music project. So, and as always, we will keep you updated on upcoming events, as well as be in initiatives and everything that we are doing. So, finally, if you're looking for a great gift to give at any time of the year, pick up your copy of Name Dropping, which was created by board member Deanna Williams and her best friend Jesus Reyna. It is the frustratingly fun movie trivia card game, and we play it all the time at SeaCon. It's always such a fantastic time. It's very engaging. You learn about movies and some facts that you may not have known before. It's just a wonderful game, and you're supporting one of our members and one of our supporters as well too. So this wraps up this episode of In the Cut. We hope you enjoyed the show and that you will join us again. As a reminder, we air every first and third Saturday of each month. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and spread the word. Please follow us on Facebook at BlackNonbelievers, Instagram at BNonbelievers Inc., X, formerly known as Twitter, at BNonbelievers. The B and the N are capitalized. We are also on Blue Sky at BNonbelieversInc.bsky.social. And of course, we are on YouTube. Just a reminder, our channel is monetized, so please drop us a super chat. You can also drop a donation after we air, so please do support us on YouTube as well. And of course, we are always looking for volunteers and new affiliate leaders. So find your local BN meetup or join all of them, because we do have virtual programming in addition to in-person programming. And also, speaking of in-person programming, I did forget to mention that on July 12th in Chicago, there will be a debate hosted by our BN of Chi-Town affiliate, Cynthia, between Ronald McCullough and there's also going to be a pastor talking about the state of religion in Black communities. So please join our Chi-Town affiliate for that at the Hedgewish Public Library. And also there is a link if you'd like to volunteer with Black Nonbelievers, you may do so. And of course, once again, we encourage you to make your tax-deductible donation to Black Nonbelievers. You can go to our website where you will see our new Platinum Seal of Transparency on Candid. And also, if you'd like to make your donation anonymous, you can do so through the PayPal Giving Fund. So please, please, please do support our work. And also, you can, in addition to us tabling in person, you can order and purchase your BN swag online. Just as an example, our shirt, Walking by Sight, Not Faith, which is our slogan. You can also order your hoodie, your mug, your shot glass, and other swag. Please visit our online store today. Take care. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and we will see you next time. Bye.